Lanka is currently facing an unprecedented economic crisis. How do you expect Sri Lanka to recover from this?
There is a general consensus among economists. I am not an economist, but among general consensus among economists and other senior experienced leaders in the country, both in government and opposition, that the only way to at least get a brief breathing space is to go to the IMF and restructure our loans, because we have a big debt repayment we have to pay at regular intervals. Even this year we have a huge debt repayment to make. So if we can restructure our loans, we may be able to use the foreign exchange that is available. So the immediate task that the country faces is to make the lives of the people a little more easier, because they are now saddled with multiple issues. No milk powder, no fuel, no electricity, no cement. So life has become very difficult. So this process of restructuring of the debts that Sri Lanka owes will help to enable the government to get some foreign exchange to give short-term relief to the people. Of course, there is need for a long-term plan, and my belief is that the whole country, that is the government, the opposition, civil society, independent experts, all have to put together to pull this country out of this economic mess.
What is one country, one law? Exactly. How exactly will new plan to rule all Sri Lankan communities under one law?
When you say one country, one law, the normal meaning as you read the words is like saying that there is one law for everybody and all will be treated equally before the law. That is a simple understanding of the phrase. But in the Sri Lankan context, it has a different meaning. We have to go back to the election campaign of the present government, when the presidential election and parliamentary election. They campaigned on a one country, one law. They used the 2019 Easter attack as one of the justifications to remove the personal laws in the country. Now, Sri Lanka has a glorious history of allowing all the every community which has a personal law to be governed by the personal law. Now, the personal laws generally, if you look at the Muslim personal law, it is limited to a few things: marriage, divorce, intestate succession, the consequences of divorce, and the waqufs, that is the mosques and charitable trusts. So the Muslim personal law only covers that area, and the marriage and divorce laws under the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act are enforced through a system of Qazi courts, special courts designed to implement the provisions of divorce and so on, and the consequences of divorce and so on, through the Qazi court system. Now, what the government is trying to do, and that has been their slogan during the election, to drive fear among the majority community and say that only if you abolish the personal laws, and when they say abolish the personal laws, they use that phrase, but they are targeting the Muslim law, because they have been targeting the Muslims on various matters. Now, at the moment, what Muslims are concerned is that they are going to be deprived of the Muslim personal law, which has been enjoyed by them for hundreds of years without a problem to anybody. No, it does not impact on other communities. No harm is done to other communities. So this is essentially a strategy imposed or implemented as part of the Islamophobic agenda that is being pursued. So to answer the question, so in the meantime now, the process of amending the personal laws was started by the Ministry of Justice. Now, the Ministry of Justice didn't do that in a transparent way. They had presented to cabinet and got approval to abolish the the Qazi courts and the right to polygamy. And it was only accidentally, later the Muslim community came to be aware of it and raised concerns about it. Now, what has happened is the president has appointed a presidential task force headed by controversial monk, Venerable Galagodatta Gnanasara Thera, who has been campaigning loudly and spreading hate about Muslims. He has insulted Islam and said that Islam is a cancer, and he has denigrated or insulted Almighty Allah on public platforms. Now, he has been appointed to recommend the concept, how to implement the concept of one country, one law. And knowing his background and his previous statements, we all know that he is targeting the Muslim personal law, and he has been targeting the Muslims as a whole. In fact, the Minister of Justice about a month or two ago addressed the Muslim ambassadors who are ambassadors of Muslim countries stationed in Sri Lanka, and assured them that the right to exercise the religion and to exercise the personal law will be not denied to the Muslims, and that the status quo will continue to remain. Now, unfortunately, shortly after that, the Minister of Justice, who himself is a Muslim, presented a paper in cabinet which was in violation of the promise given by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. His proposal sought to remove the Qazi courts and replace it with some other name called conciliators, and also move some of the jurisdiction of the Qazi courts to the district court and all that. That's a long, I will take long time to go into that, so I will not go into it. But basically, the Muslim community's right to exercise the personal law is being challenged, and most Muslims fear that when the presidential task force chairman's report comes, it will be to remove the Muslim personal law. That is the fear that Muslims have.
The trial of 25 men accused of plotting the 2019 Easter Sunday bombing in Sri Lanka. What is the current situation of this issue?
The unfortunate thing about the Easter Sunday attack, it was a great tragedy because innocent people were killed. The question is, who did it and who was responsible for it? Of course, initially, because the suicide bombers who were involved were Muslims, the spotlight turned to the Muslims. And of course, those Islamophobic elements fanned the flames and pointed the direction at the Muslims. But as far as the Muslims were concerned, these few individuals who were involved in this were not known. They had not articulated any grievances about Muslims or anything like that, and they did it for some agenda of their own, which is not yet clearly brought out to the public. And the strong suspicion and emerging evidence over the time, particularly the Catholic Church and Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit, who's heading the agitation about justice for the Catholics, believe that there is more to it than meets the eye. That is Muslims, and he has publicly said so, that Muslims are not to blame for this incident. He says, yes, there were some Muslims involved in the attack, but there is a larger conspiracy. There has to be a mastermind who carried out this attack. And that stands to reason, because the attack in several churches and hotels was so synchronized and done in a very organized way that within, I think, half an hour, all the explosions took place. So to do that, there has to be some very sophisticated planning, sophisticated machinery to implement it. So far, no such person has been identified. And there are many gaps. As far we don't know what is internally, we don't know what all the investigations have revealed, but to the public knowledge, there are many gaps in the investigation which have not been investigated. So naturally, there is a great deal of suspicion about the investigations to the attack, and the lament of the Cardinal and the Catholic people is that next month, April, 3 years have lapsed and no sufficient progress has been made to identify and bring to book those who were mainly responsible for the attack. Of course, we understand that about 25 people have been indicted in the courts. The trial has not yet started. So when the trial starts, we will know more of what the evidence they have is. But in short, there is a big trust deficit both among the Catholics as well as the Muslims and even the rest of the country, that the investigations are not yielding results sufficiently fast, particularly to determine who was behind this dastardly act. Well, to start a trial, of course, there is a process. The investigations have to be completed. Then after the investigations are completed, the investigation notes have to be sent to the Attorney General, who has to peruse the documents and see who can be charged with it or indicted for those offences and what is the evidence. So he has to prepare a sort of a charge sheet, which we call a indictment. So that takes a little bit of time, but the concern is not so much about the delay in preparing the indictment, but the concern is that there are several gaps in the investigation which need to be investigated and closed. It must be a credible, fair investigation which results in the trust of all communities. Because this, though it was the Catholic community that was targeted or were the largest victims, this is an attack on the whole Sri Lankan nation, because this is not something that we have ever dreamt could happen in this country.
Sri Lanka made some progress ahead of the 49th session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. The President has said no human rights abuses have taken place during his tenure. Can we hope for progress on human rights in Sri Lanka?
The President has said that no human rights violations take place under the present government. That is good news if it is put into practice. But particularly if you go to the north and the east, there is a great deal of criticism about the surveillance on civil society activists, curbs on their freedom where they are not free to act and so on. Even with regard to the Easter Sunday attacks, there are many young people who have been detained for nearly 3 years. Most of them were not involved. They are innocent people who misguidedly went for some leadership training or something, not knowing what they went in for. So there is a continuous violations. Even the media exercises a great deal of self-censorship. So I don't think that we can be happy about the human rights situation in Sri Lanka. But of course, one thing I must say is that as a result of what happened, the reforms brought about by the previous government, the Yapalna government, the democratic space opened up, and even during that time, the President and Prime Minister were criticized strongly, but there were no repercussions, and people have now got used to that, so they are speaking out. But there is always the danger that the system will push us towards the curbing of human rights.